Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn.
Both been here too long. You can't go back to Ireland or Poland or England, and I can't go back to Africa. And we will live here together, or we'll die here together. And it's not I am telling you. Time is telling you. You will listen or you will perish.
You ever felt?
Are you listening?
In May of 2019, I wrote a blog piece called People of Color, Why Do We Keep Coming at Each Other? I had always been bothered by the way minorities had been pitted against each other and how we somehow couldn't seem to understand that only through unity could we be our strongest. On Monday, when I sat down to think about what to speak on for this week, I had no idea how quickly things in this country would escalate. Because of that, before we get into this video, I want to say this. Hate and violence directed towards any minority community is an attack on every minority community. This is not an either-or situation. We can work towards the advancement of Black people and support Asian Americans as well. Stop Asian hate. A while back, I rewatched a comedy called Our Family Wedding. I had watched this movie years before when it first came out. I had remembered it as a cute little movie about an interracial couple and their journey to the altar. A little dated perhaps, but funny nonetheless. As I rewatched it, I realized that its humor depended solely on the Black and Mexican American communities' supposed hate for each other. And I was disgusted by how white Hollywood could see this at all as funny.
You're gonna have to come climb your car.
What, you think I would trust this ride with somebody like you?
Excuse me?
What, you don't speak English now?
We're speaking English, bro.
Oh, I'm not your bruh, ese.
And I'm not your ese, cuz.
I'm not your cuz, vato.
Vato, ¿sabes qué? No hablo inglés.
Buenos días.
Abuela, this is Marcus.
Ma'am,
Are you okay?
are you okay?
No me toques. No me toques.
I was trying
Get
to help.
up. Come on. Abuela.
What it did do for me was remind me that we, people of color, keep perpetuating racist stereotypes about other minorities. Very often we do this out of anger, out of pure habit or ignorance of another culture, but mostly we do this because we've been taught by the white power structure to reduce each other to the lowest common denominator. 2 days ago, Vox put out an article covering the history of the tension between the Black and Asian American communities. The overarching theme of the article was white supremacy as the catalyst. Even though they could not find evidence that African Americans were the majority of aggressors in attacks on Asian Americans, this is still the idea that is floated in the media regardless of the facts. What they did highlight, however, was the truth that the hate between the two communities benefits only one entity, the white power structure. This is not new. American media and white supremacy have been pitting races against each other since the beginning. One of the ways that white supremacy keeps the racial divide going between the races is the concept of the model minority. The model minority is a desired ethnic demographic that is held up to this country's undesirable minority groups as an example of what the undesirable group should behave like. Unfortunately, in this country, the Asian community is used by white supremacy as the shining example of the preferred behavior, which only furthers the divide between the Asian American community and other minorities. The media spurs this along by the continuous portrayal of blacks and Latinos as uneducated, violent, and capable of maintaining cohesive family structures and high incarceration rates, and then pushes the concept that Asian Americans are crime-free, well-behaved, and compliant members of the American society, along with portraying them as docile and cohorts to white supremacy. All of this while refusing to admit that these narratives were created for two very specific reasons. 1, to establish and maintain a highly effective racial divide. 2, to further the agenda of the white power structure. The media continues these false narratives to this day, while simultaneously ignoring how this country has demonized, abused, and humiliated every single one of its minority groups in one way or another. Here are some examples. Now keep in mind that I can't go over every single heinous act in this country because that would literally take weeks. So here are just a few. 1, how the war on drugs started in 1937 with reefer madness to target Mexican Americans, and it picked up steam with the Just Say No campaign, which highlighted the crack epidemic and targeted specifically the black community. 2, the negative and harmful ways that Asian Americans are portrayed, if at all, in the media are consistently backwards. The men are goofy and unsexy, and the women are overly compliant. This merely names a few offensive ways that they are portrayed in media and in this society. 3, the consistent criminalization of black Americans as documented in the Netflix movie 13th.
1 out of 4 human beings with their hands on bars, shackled, in the world are locked up here in the land of the free.
Khalif Browder was walking home from a party when he was stopped by police.
Then they said, we're going to take you to the precinct, and most likely we're going to let you go home, and then I never went home.
The 13th Amendment to the Constitution makes it unconstitutional for someone to be held as a slave. There are exceptions, including criminals.
The loophole was immediately exploited. What you got after that was a rapid transition to a mythology of black criminality.
Some people got the real problem. Animals, beasts that needed to be controlled.
You better believe it.
I'm only human.
It became virtually impossible for a politician to run and appear soft on crime.
The kinds of kids that are called super predatory.
What isn't discussed in the media, and for most people in both communities, what they are rarely made aware of is the collaboration between the groups. The Alliance of the Filipino Community in San Francisco and the Black Panther Party to protest Mayor George Mosconi's attempt at a mass eviction of the International Hotel, which for many was the last remaining stronghold for Little Manila. The hotel did not just house Filipino Americans, it also housed members of other Asian American communities. The Oxnard strike in 1903, when Mexican and Japanese American farm laborers pushed back against the racist agenda used by their bosses to divide both sets of workers. Take the Third World Liberation Front movement. In 1968, students in San Francisco State University came together to create the TWLF, or the Third World Liberation Front. This group comprised of the Black Student Union and other campus student-led groups. They united to take on the underrepresentation of the students of color in academic studies. Then, in 1969, at UC Berkeley, a chapter of the TWLF was established to once again take on the lack of courses covering African American, Asian American, Chicano and Chicanas, and Native history. Their focus was to create a third world college. What they got instead was the Department of Ethnic Studies. There are so many instances when we chose to work together rather than against each other. Take last summer and the exploding Black Lives Matter movement. The Black community didn't do it alone. The majority of the protests were multiracial in their makeup. So what does the white power structure get out of this divide? How hard do they have to fight us if we take up their mantle and continue their fight for them? We all know that our world is run and based off of colonization. White privilege is real. Part of that privilege is being able to impart racist ideology and dogma about one minority group upon another minority group, and then that group continues to perpetuate it amongst themselves. So what do? Instead of pushing back and refusing to fall for their false narratives, we identify with their agenda. For many, a small but important part of us still manage to see them as superior. So we continue to perpetuate the concept of the model minority. We still see Latinos and Black people as shiftless and lazy. What I'm about to say might really piss some of you off, but before you get angry, stop and think about it for a second. Really reflect on the possible truth of it. For some of you, you must step away from the love of the white gaze. Become comfortable being uncomfortable with their anger over rejecting them and their standards. For those of you that believe being white adjacent will keep you safe, you need to realize that the only reason they are okay with you, for now, is your compliance and your complicity in furthering the racial divide. Never forget they gave us reservations, ghettos, redlining, housing projects, mass incarceration. They encouraged our distrust of each other. They annihilated our religions and replaced them with their own. Institutionalized racism has kept us down, not other minorities. We know this, but we still struggle with letting go of our biases. Instead of immediately rejecting each other, let's have conversations, speak to each other, not at each other. We need to let go of our narrow-minded viewpoints and listen. Truly listen, because the only way we're going to get through this hole is by helping, not hurting one another. Please let me know how what I said has made you feel. I honestly want to create a dialogue. I'm not trying to have this conversation alone. Until we meet again, this fight is for all of us, not some of us.